Hi, everyone. How are you? My name's Sam Zimmerman. I'm the curator of Shudder. Allow me to introduce the minds behind the endless, Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead. Hello.
Hey.
Hi, gentlemen.
Hey.
I guess the place to start for this movie is that you wrote it, directed it, and decided to star in it. There is a connection, whether the audience knows or not, to another one of your films. Tell us about continuing those characters or making these characters for folks who don't know.
Oh, okay. So it's a two-part thing. I'll do the easiest one for myself, and I'll hand Justin the hard question, which is the one you asked. But so there's a movie. Have you guys ever seen a movie called Resolution by any chance? Raise your hand.
There, yeah.
Two people. So you are the two people in the world that have seen it. It's our first movie. It played at Tribeca in 2012, and it did nicely. It was a dark horse little release, and there's a whole movie about the two people in the cabin where one was chained up. There's a whole movie about those guys, and then I'll let Justin take the continuing that mythology question.
Yeah, we this is our third movie, and like Aaron said, the first movie was called Resolution. The second one was called Spring, and oh, cool! More people saw that one. They're both really small releases, but you know they did really well for what they were, and we had some opportunities from making two sort of self-financed, do-it-yourself movies, but we made a mistake after Spring in a way where we thought because we had made two movies that like did okay, these little indie films, that we would have these opportunities, like we'd have an investor or something in our next movie, or
I mean, how ridiculous, right?
or like just like some kind of opportunity would come our way off of those, and you know they kind of have, but those opportunities that come out of these indie films, they are bigger projects that take a really long time to get going. You know, whether you're waiting on casting or you're waiting on financing, or producers kind of come and go. Or we have TV shows where they've just been in development a long time because it takes a long time to develop a TV show. So we just thought, you know what, we've got to make something again, how we made our first two films, where we were really self-reliant, and performing in the film became part of being self-reliant and getting this movie made.
So these, in some way, these characters have lived with you for a while. What was new that you brought to them? You know, what changed about the way you thought about them in portraying them here?
Oh, it's funny because again, only the two people that have seen Resolution will. But so in Resolution, actually, so you saw the only scene in Resolution that Aaron and Justin popped up in, the offering that was on the bottom of the lake. When they popped it in, and there's young Aaron and Justin talking to some man, trying to get them to join their religion. That's the only scene we're in Resolution. And so we played like kind of caricaturistic cult members. And when we decided to make this movie, we knew that we wanted to take a much more grounded approach to a cult or commune or whatever exactly it was. It wouldn't be quite so broad. The scene in Resolution is almost played for comedy. And so we wanted to see what it would be like if we were two real people that actually got away from a cult. What does that feel like, rather than either it being supernaturally terrifying, like I don't know, other cult movies, or something that is kind of funny, like we were playing it for. So there's a huge difference, because in this case we were trying very hard to be two real people that actually existed and lived in and got indoctrinated in a cult, and then had this weird thing happen where one character actually decided to malign the cult as a Heaven's Gate-esque thing, and then we lived with that for a few, lived with that caricature thing for a few years, and then turned it into, the two destitute people that you meet in the Endless.
And what are your histories with performing? Because you are, coming onto this in a much bigger capacity than in Resolution. And how are you approaching these characters? How are you approaching actually the craft of it for you guys?
There's stuff I've never even told Aaron about where it's like, it doesn't apply to this, but I took Shakespearean acting in college, and I took lots of performing stuff in college. And then getting into my career, any opportunity there would ever be to work with other filmmakers, just in tiny little bit parts, was always really appealing. And there's something extremely attractive about collaborating with other filmmakers as a performer, because you can really be at the creative center of something, but it's not something that you have to devote yourself usually to for 3 years, which is what it is to direct a movie. But then, something that Aaron and I have always done in our process with performers, and anything we've ever done, whether it was a commercial or the movies we've done or a short film or anything, was the biggest part of our process is rehearsal. And maybe that's super obvious to people, but in filmmaking, it's a little bit of a controversial thing, because there are some people who believe that if you rehearse, you're going to miss some magical take in rehearsal, and then you're not going to get it when you get to set. We tend to just make our entire movies in pre-production and then go execute them in front of a camera when the crew's around. And you still get some jazz, you still get some magic. There's still the best take you're always chasing, but we tend to just rehearse the hell out of everything for months before we get to set, and that would be the biggest part of our process. And then another thing Aaron and I were talking about recently was some of our biggest lessons as performers came from directing other really talented actors and all the other stuff we've done. And so yeah.
Well, it was also editing them too was a really big part of it, because you don't just see what they did on set and what they remember they did. You get to watch over and over and over the things that you loved and the things you think were stupid, and you can kind of like maneuver all of those and add them together in weird little ways, and you start realizing the things that you said to them plus the choices that they made and the types of people they are, how that turns out in the edit. And since we're making the movie ourselves, we're editing the movie as well. While we're even rolling, we're cutting the movie in our heads, and we kind of know what works and what doesn't, and what pieces we want to grab. And that's an odd part of the process. I know that we don't always get to do that, but that was definitely a large piece of it. Also, I really like the idea of if we were starting to make this movie and you're like, oh, we should be in this movie. I'm like, what credentials do you have to be in this movie? You're like, I took Shakespearean acting in college.
I really did it. If you can imagine, yeah. I don't know why we never talked about it. Yeah. Now I'm embarrassed. I don't know why.
I don't know either.
So how are you applying that, and what are you learning? I imagine there's an interesting dichotomy where you're directing everyone else on set, but also in some ways learning from them by being around them. You have someone like Lou Temple, who is this veteran character actor who's been around and is such a strong performer. How are you getting into scenes with him, giving, receiving, that kind of stuff?
It's crazy to hear you actually mention Lou specifically, just because, he has 3 lines in the whole movie, and he's the one that comes up a lot. Yeah.
He's a guy, he's around, everyone knows his face in a way.
Yeah. Well, what happened was, when we sent him the script, he was not convinced that it was worth his time to come out for no money whatsoever, and come out into the forest for 5 days and just stand around, but he still actually entertained it because he liked the script, and so we ended up talking to him in 2 different sessions, and this was the most interesting thing for us, because we talked for probably a total of about 9 hours. And again, he has 3 lines and 2 are about beer, and we didn't really know where it was going, because we talked about his life and we talked about the character and the world and all of that. And truly a very, very long amount of conversation, by far the most we've had about something like that. And we didn't really know where it was going, but we realized that he can actually do what we're talking about in a look. And before that, I wouldn't have really believed it. I would have thought, it's just director talk. They're just saying that, to compliment the actor or whatever. But truly, anyone else, it would have just been some guy that's standing around staring ominously every once in a while. And now it's the guy that keeps on coming up. And what's really cool is those scenes, he's only ever in them for like one shot or two shots or in the wide shot. So he can't even use it in his demo reel. He just did it because he thought it was a cool role. I mean, how cool is that for him to actually to do that and not be like, well, there's that one scene at the end of the movie where I get to really teach him what life is about. He didn't even have that.
One of the things I love in this movie is in all of your films, you pull off this sort of amazing otherworldly aspect on, to hear you guys tell it what is a very small amount of money. I would love to know about especially the struggle and the rope and what was going on, how you pulled off that scene. You mentioned to me before it's some amazing combination of exactly what you think it is and something else.
Yeah, so the struggle scene with the tug of war with this sort of unseen antagonist deity of our film. The conception of that, what it was the best attempt at trying to give people the thrill of being creeped out, but doing it with no money. And there's several pieces in this movie in fact, all of our movies like that. But there was something about that was just kind of psychologically, it felt like, it feels like this idea would make an audience feel uneasy, and it's a very interesting image, and all it requires is a rope and a pulley on a tree, and our key grip pulling on the rope on the other side of the tree, and then when you look at the raw footage, it's actually once you crush the blacks and you darken it down, it doesn't look terrible. It just doesn't quite sell as like the impossible. You'd probably still look at it and be like, cool, you got a pulley on a tree and your key grip pulling on it. But then Aaron's a visual effects genius, and he just basically he removed the trees and he placed the moon there, and it just gave this feeling of like probably out in that expanse is not trees but more like a field, and it just becomes more and more unlikely that Smiling Dave is out there on a ladder pulling on it. So and it gives this feeling of the otherworldly on a shoestring budget.
Can you talk a bit more about, I guess, the otherworldly? I know it's something that you seem to wrestle with in your films, and it's something that's really here, the unknown, the endless. What was personal and what's profound about those things? What is the metaphysical to you? What do you guys think about when you wrestle with it together, especially writing it together?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I was raised a Christian, he was raised an atheist, and we're both very extraordinarily skeptical people. I've since become agnostic, but we're both absolutely terrified of the fact that there's just nothing else out there, and if that's true, that is something that is a little bit more frightening to us than horror movies traditionally, like meaning like a monster. I don't mean horror movies. I mean a monster, a slasher, a serial killer, that kind of a thing. And so hence that quote at the very beginning of the movie. And so a lot of our movies are more looking at the idea of something like what's worse than death, what's more terrifying than being alone, those sorts of things. And so a lot of the time what we're doing when we're developing this is trying to convince ourselves of a world that exists, that even if it's not all roses, that there is a little bit more to the world than like what you can feel and see and all of that. And weirdly enough, that has been not just therapeutic, but our last movie, the whole idea is saying like you could say that love is purely chemicals, but there is just something about it that feels a lot more like magic, and it really does. And all of our movies kind of chase that dragon. And this one in many ways talks about, look, I don't think it would happen, but if I went out into the middle of forest and thought that I found God, I would probably dedicate my whole life to it. I'd just be like, oh, I found the most important thing in the world. Even if it was something malevolent, I would just be too curious to run away. And so that's kind of why we're so attracted to it.
We've had these conversations where we're like, that'd be so rad to actually find a haunted house. Because the implications, the metaphysicals are amazing. Like you go ask the ghost, you'd be like, so there's more? And like,
why are you trying to freak us out?
Why are you in Victorian wear? How come you guys never wear normal clothes?
Where are the caveman ghosts?
and like you get it all figured out. And then you stole that. And then
fuck you stole the ghost thing.
But I mean, wouldn't that be amazing? Like, would you run scared from it? Doesn't it like confirm all kinds of great stuff? I don't know.
Sounds like your next movie. We'll get working on it.
You mentioned something about, thinking about, the world may not all be roses. I think there's a great contrast to where we see your characters in the beginning of the film to when you arrive at the commune. And I wanted to know how you approached creating the commune, both in a photographic sense, but also with your ensemble. Did you encourage them to look at life on a commune? How did you encourage them to not be the caricatures that maybe you were when you first portrayed these characters?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't want to make. Have you seen The Sacrament? Well, you have, of course. There's a movie like The Sacrament that basically depicts Jonestown, and we didn't really want to make something that when you look at it, you're like, why on earth are you joining this cult? Of course, it's a cult. It looks like a cult. That guy's the cult leader, And we just thought if these two brothers are going to live in it and have any kind of nostalgic memories of it and want to go back. We can't make it like a cult. They can have some odd beliefs, but beyond that, it has to be a commune. And so we looked at all the hallmarks of it. We did minor research, Wikipedia, and I wish we'd watched Wild Wild Country. That movie's awesome, or that show's awesome. Actually, we just found out the directors of that are moderating our Q&A this Friday, which will be incredible. Yeah, and we just watched more episodes of it today. We love that. Anyways. But we look at it and just think, why would anybody join a cult? And you realize it's not just the sense of belonging, not just the community, the sense of you getting answers, but it's just that it doesn't look as dangerous as the word cult implies. And that's what we wanted to build.
Great. We do have questions. Hang on. Got him. Question from Adam. And actually, there's another question from Chris, and both of them are fairly similar, so I think I'm going to ask them together. But it's about your collaboration process and specifically how you navigate editing together.
Yeah, it's funny. Our producer, David Lawson, who he recently revealed to us that he's like, so just so you guys know, this process, this thing you guys do in editing, it shouldn't work. It just shouldn't work. This is impossible. But we've been doing it for years and years and years now. And what we basically do is that when the movie's done and in the can, we each take half of the movie, and we each cut. And someone gets the first half, someone gets the second half, and then we edit those scenes together, and then we each get like a week or two or something, and then we trade. And then we work on the other person's half, and we'll just do that back and forth for a while. But actually, the first step in the process, actually I left out, is we have a third editor. This guy Michael Falcor has been working with us for a while, and he'll put together the first assembly cut. And like all great editors, he'll make a few discoveries that we could have never made. But at the same time, our movies are uniquely shot to be cut together one way, too. But for the most part, he'll find a few things, but for the most part, they just kind of, we're kind of cutting it in our heads as we go along, and it tends to stay with the shot list that we planned. But yeah, after swapping it back and forth halves for a while, we land on it, and then we do some test screenings, which for us, we found that the best way to do test screenings is to send the link to people to watch it independently, rather than getting a bunch of people in the theater to watch it and then conducting a group Q&A, because then you can end up with a sort of group think where people, you don't actually, it's harder to flag a problem when people aren't watching it independently. So, yeah.
And the question also mentions, Aaron, you as DP, and how that factors into your collaboration.
Oh, I mean, technically only one person can hold a camera, so without breaking the laws of physics, I get to be the DP. In this case, actually, we even got to have an operator since I was on camera. But honestly, it's interesting. I don't. I view the process of filmmaking as much more of a larger task than say the sum of cinematography and editing and directing and all of that. And what I mean by that is I don't really think of myself as a cinematographer very much. I used to do it professionally. It's obviously what I do for our films, but I just view cinematography in the same breath that I view directing, and in this case, acting, and in many ways, it's all just part of this huge problem that has to get solved, which is making this movie. And so Justin's always right there for me. There's a brief amount of time that I spend lighting the scene. We talk about the lighting plans. We talk about where the camera's going to go and all of that. And then, but it's odd to just you're kind of bouncing stations at all times, just because everything has to be done at once. There was one time on this set where it became particularly difficult, and it was funny where it was only one exact instance I can remember it really well, where we were out by the campfire. It was 4 a.m. It was extremely cold, and I realized I was lighting a shot of myself, and I was looking at the monitor. But the monitor, so if you guys are the camera, which is where the camera was, the monitor was over here. So and also right where the monitor was a light in my eyes. And so I was looking at the side of my own face, and then when I'd look back to like fix it, I realized the monitor's not in front of me anymore. and so I couldn't figure out, I was like light in my eyes, can't see the front of my face, where's the camera? And I was just like, oh man, this is overwhelming shooting this movie and acting at the same time. And so what I did was I took one really big deep breath and I go, oh, hey guys, can we move the monitor over by the camera? And it just solved the problem immediately. So it's honestly, it wasn't really all that big of a deal. It was just that one moment where it's like, oh, that's right. Take a breath. Think about it for a damn second. You'll be fine,
Awesome. I feel, so it's interesting, not necessarily usual to go live, but I feel like this movie is so otherworldly, profound, really pulls you in, that I thought there might be at least one or two questions that weren't prepared for beforehand, before you can experience what this movie is. And I see one right here, and I think if it's okay, I'm going to go to it. Is that okay? Let's go to it.
Can I ask what you guys shot it on?
Yeah.
Were those drone shots, the sky shots?
So the question for anyone who couldn't hear is, what did you shoot on, and were there drone shots?
Yeah, it was Red Dragon, I think. I think it was Dragon at that time. We got lucky and we found a guy who was kind enough to rent us some anamorphic primes for really cheap, which was nice, and an anamorphized zoom Canon. I think it was a Cooke, not Canon, Cooke 20-120. I think it was. I'm sorry, it's been a while now. And they weren't drones. We actually invented we padded him and invented a catapult, and he had a GoPro. We just threw him into the air in slow motion. It was great. Yeah, it was drones.
Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves style.
Yeah, we were lucky enough to borrow a drone. So, yeah.
And Jay, right there.
I wanted to thank you for the sound work on this, the sound design and the music. Great.
Awesome. Yeah, well-deserved round of applause for the sound design and music.
I really applaud you too for not upstaging your characters and the cult and everything with too much CGI. A lot of times I feel like, well, the CGI guys go crazy and they sort of upstage the story. And I applaud you for that too. It's terrific.
Thank you. We almost can't take responsibility for that. We can't afford CGI. But I wish I wasn't joking. And then with the sound, thank you so much for bringing that up, because anytime we show our movies to anyone and they haven't been properly sound mixed by our sound mixer / sound designer, sound guru, this guy Yael Dooley, our movies are terrible before they're sound mixed. Like, they just don't. You can find problems and you can diagnose things, but they're not a movie yet. And he does an absolutely incredible job. And he's been with us for 3 movies and several short films, and he's kind of like our third director. And then with the composer, the score, it's interesting. The score to this movie doesn't get mentioned all that much. And I think that's actually a compliment to our composer, Jimmy LaValle, who's better known as, do you guys anyone know the band The Album Leaf? Oh, cool. So that's actually, The Album Leaf did the score. The Album Leaf is basically this guy, Jimmy LaValle, and some of his collaborators. And they all worked on this score. And man, there's a few times you see magic on set, maybe actually just 2. And one of them is when you see the take that you want out of all your performers, and you chase that take for a few more, but you never quite get back there. It was just magic. And then it's when you give your locked cut to your composer, and he shows you some music he's worked on to it, and we were just, man, I've seen Aaron look like he was on Molly the first time he heard it. He was like grinding his jaw. It was like so like it was so amazing when we heard this for the first time, and
I was also on Molly for that.
Yeah. But he is, you know, people say all kinds of hyperbole about their collaborators when they're talking about their movie, but I just can't be sincere enough that both of those guys, but right now we're talking about specifically Jimmy, our composer, he is a brilliant genius, and I don't think this movie works without his music.
Yeah, he doesn't know how to make, he couldn't make a traditional score. Well, maybe he could, but he hasn't dared to with us, and I hope he never does. And I remember, especially with this movie, the track when we were arriving to camp, first time I heard that in its complete form was that spiritual moment. And then for those of you that saw Spring, there's this amazing track he has where they walk through where our two leads see each other for the first time, and they walk through the city square and lock eyes in slow motion, and it's and that moment could be the cheesiest thing in the world, and Jimmy finds a way to just make it incredible. So, yeah.
And, you know, I guess going forward, how are you guys feeling about your roles in the work you make? You know, do you want to do something like this again? Do you want to take a step back?
Do you mean in terms of wearing all the hats, or do you mean just acting again?
Acting, specifically.
Oh, we were both, a little reticent about acting in the role. Not reticent isn't even the word, but you just don't know how it's going to go. You don't know, and you can develop a confidence as filmmakers after a couple decently well-received indie films, but you could also look like just the stupidest idiots if you ruin your own movie by being a bad actor, you know? And right after our first few rehearsals, we'd seen enough decent performances, good performances from our collaborators that at least I knew Justin's performance was good, and I believed him when he told me mine was working. And at that point, we kind of got bitten by the. Are you all actors, by the way? Is it filmmakers and actors? Actors all. So we got bitten by the same bug. You know, it was just like, oh, we're gonna do this again. Oh my God, this is the greatest thing in the world. So yeah, and we'd absolutely love to. So.
Yeah, I think I can speak for both of us in that acting, it just feels like we love filmmaking, and it just feels like it's part of the filmmaking process. And I think if I were a gaffer on set, everyone would get electrocuted, and it would be a huge lawsuit. But the point is like all these jobs are so hard. Acting, being a grip, being an electrician, being a PA. Being the field mixer, being the post sound mixer, like everything is so hard, but it's so gratifying to be able to participate in any way you can. And if you can participate in the role of actor, it feels like you're just being a more fully formed filmmaker in one more way, and that you understand the whole process from another point of view, and that's really, really enjoyable.
Awesome. Guys, Justin Benson, Aaron Moorhead. When does the movie come out? When is the film out?
So the film comes out this weekend at IFC Center, and it'll be continuing a full theatrical run there. LA the next weekend after that, and then it'll be expanding around the nation after that. I will quickly say, the two things, if you really, really dug it, the two things you can do is, I'm pretty sure MoviePass works at IFC Center. Get all your MoviePass friends, because opening weekends really matter so much. So make sure to grab a ticket even if you don't go. And then also just get on social media, get loud. So. And
also, if you loved it and you haven't seen Spring or Resolution, they're incredibly beautiful movies. These guys are amazing. Tell all your friends and support them.
Thank you, everybody.